Hey everyone, are you ready to make an impact and become a game changer in your industry? Well, join me because in this video, I'll share my 7 steps to turning the tables in any field so that you can turn the tables in yours. So let's get into it. So step number 1 is to accumulate the skills and master the rules that govern your area. And this is taken from Robert Greene's book, Mastery, where he runs through the different transformations you should take to get to the point of mastery in any field. It's a fantastic book, I'd thoroughly recommend it, and I wish I'd found it 10 years ago when I'd started out. But yeah, I definitely did this as the first step into my game-changing ideas. So I studied as an actuary, I did maths at uni, then did 4 years of investment studying basically, which is essentially another master's, and then also applied that in the market. So I used my knowledge to pick different investment strategies for our clients, and yeah, definitely feel like I mastered all the different types of investment products that are out there and the theory that kind of went behind them. So yeah, number 1, make sure you master the basics. So then step number 2 is to use these skills that you've accumulated as to start pursuing your own objectives. So when you're learning and when you're in your apprenticeship, you're probably just working for your boss and doing what they want to do or doing what the business wants you to do. But step 2 is about making sure that you're using some of your knowledge to start thinking for yourself and understanding how you might use it to meet your objectives. So for me at this stage, I felt like once I'd accumulated all the skills and reached near the periphery of knowledge, I wanted to demonstrate that I'd mastered this. So I basically was quite bold with the investment strategies I picked. I picked strategies in emerging and frontier markets. I picked very volatile strategies, and this definitely got my name out there and had a pretty big impact on the portfolios I worked on. However, I set my sights even bigger than impacting the portfolios I worked on, and so I wanted to make sure that I was thinking about what I could do to impact the overall portfolio or the overall industry. So that was always bubbling away in the back of my mind. The next step, step 3, is about implementation. So it's about making sure that you're bold and creative and potentially moving against the status quo, which is going to be really difficult. It's going to feel difficult because most people stay within the status quo. People don't like change. You're probably going to get a lot of pushback, and you might even question your own beliefs as you move into this area of unknown. But that area of unknown is where all the growth happens, so it just needs to happen. You know, for me, as I was explaining my investment theses for a lot of these investment strategies, I was quite quickly realizing the limitations of all the theory that I'd been brought up on. So for example, for a lot of the hedge funds, trying to show that the strategy's performance followed a normal distribution just didn't work in any way. And then also on another strategy, which was kind of the LATAM frontier strategy, it was more focused on how, I guess, market participant behavior created the opportunity for that investment. So in pushing these strategies, I was also having to highlight the flaws with the common thinking around, you know, efficient market hypothesis, mean variance portfolio optimization theory, normal distributions, option pricing, like all this theory that we'd learned. I'd realized that in practice it didn't quite make sense. So I was very vocal about pushing back against the use of those sorts of models and also providing alternatives. I actually very recently read The Misbehavior of Markets by Benoit Mandelbrot. He's obviously came to the same conclusion, obviously much earlier than me in like the 70s. So I wish I'd had this book earlier. I think he talks about all the issues with current portfolio theory and why it doesn't work in the real world, and I think it's really important to be aware of that if you're participating in the markets. So once you've kind of established yourself as pushing back against current theory, you obviously need to propose an alternative, and that's where step number 4 comes in. So that's about expanding your horizons outside of your traditional area and learning about different adjacent concepts and trying to see how you can apply it to what you're currently doing. This is going to feel very uncomfortable because you're going to be moving out of your clear sphere of competence, but that's the point. You want to expand your horizons and try and bring in areas of knowledge or kind of useful models from other areas that you can apply. So this requires you to be extremely open-minded, and I remember this phase when I was going through it probably about 4 years ago, and I knew I had to move into a new area because I wanted a long sustainable career, I wanted a long and fruitful career, and I realized that I kind of reached the end of the road in what I was doing. So I had to find something new, and so I found myself moving towards areas where I would naturally shy away from. So learning about things, well, like sustainability, for example, that to me was a bit of an attack on my lifestyle and things that I liked, so eating meat and travel. I thought they're not sustainable, and why would I want to read something that conflicts with my beliefs? But I kind of pushed through and noticed that and moved into that difficulty. Other areas included, you know, crypto. That was a new and complex area, hard to get your hands around, hard to understand, but obviously new. I think one of the techniques is if people around you are kind of hating on it, then maybe it's worth a bit of research, because people around you are hating on it. It's probably new, it's probably challenging challenging their beliefs, it's probably challenging your own beliefs, and that's why it's so important to move into that new area, because not many people do that at all. There are some great books written about how people from different areas have come into a field and completely changed things or revolutionised the way things are done. One of those books is Rebel Ideas by Matthew Syed. He talks about recombinant innovations, so the idea that you can just, instead of optimizing what already exists to make it more efficient, there's another form of innovation which is way more impactful, which is just changing the game entirely. And he talks about that a lot in his book Rebel Ideas. And another book is called Range by David Epstein, and he talks about how generalists end up transforming their industry far more than people that have taken a much linear path, because they're able to draw on different areas and combine kind of their knowledge and skills in a way that people that have just got a very narrow set of abilities can't do. There's also the classic example of Steve Jobs, who did a lot of meandering in his early years. So I think he went to India and studied Buddhism. He went to art school and famously dropped out after taking a few calligraphy classes. And when he combined that with his love of computing, it enabled him to create something completely new entirely. And that's the beautiful Apple products that we all enjoy every day. So yeah, back to my own experience. Obviously, I was pushing into these new areas. I think Rita McGrath's book, Seeing Around Corners, How to Spot Inflection Points in Business Before They Happen, is a great book on how to do exactly what I just said and try and see where things might happen. Because I think when I started, I thought business kind of evolved smoothly, but what happens is you just take big lumps and jumps, and that's arguably because any company is a complex system, it doesn't move linearly. I think sustainability was definitely one of those inflection points, and crypto as well, I think, is another, but it just wasn't as applicable to the area I was working in. So then I decided to go all in with sustainability. I read as much as I could about sustainability. I did the CFA ESG and looked to quickly get on top of this new subject area that I didn't know anything about before, and also was quite painful for me because I wanted to live in the world where it didn't matter what my pollution was and what my carbon emissions were. I wanted to live in that bubble of, everything's fine and we can eat meat and fly everywhere and everything will be fine forever. So yeah, very difficult for me. So step number 5 is to experiment and use this knowledge and see how to apply it into your area. So once I'd done my kind of broad-based research and decided on sustainability, I had to think about how to bring it to business. And there were a lot of tailwinds in the industry. I think we're reaching a tipping point as an industry as a whole about sustainability. But it still wasn't kind of big business within our team. Like, people just did it as kind of a side project, and people understood it was important, I think didn't know how to apply it to a whole portfolio. So I tried lots of things. I wrote papers explaining about how it applied to different parts of the market which people thought it didn't previously apply to. I spent a lot of time talking to other parts of our business to understand how they were applying climate change and other sustainability factors into their work. And to be honest, all this was quite difficult. It was very hard to be pushing something new, especially when you're pushing against the status quo. So I guess my main advice there would just be, don't give up and make sure that you're kind of constantly pushing. And if you believe in it and if you believe it will happen, again, it's like that analogy of someone breaking a rock in half and it's the 365th blow that causes the rock to open. And it can feel like you're not getting anywhere, and then suddenly all the progress happens at once. So while you're experimenting, while you're tinkering, don't lose faith and just keep pushing if you believe in it. So then the step to applying it leads me to rule number 6, which is using the rules that originally governed your field to suit your own needs and apply your new area and show how it fits. And for me, the CFA ESG was perfect for this, because I think sustainability, a lot of people before that were talking about sustainability from a values-based orientation, and obviously our language is in risk and return, like what's the return I'm going to get? Are you going to increase alpha, reduce beta by doing this? So it was super important to kind of bring it into that language. So yeah, I realized that a lot of the theory that I spoke about in finance investment actually missed a lot of sustainability information, and for any investment you can measure sustainability characteristics, and previously that just wasn't taken into account. We were all looking at investments that kind of felt good, if that makes sense. So hey, this is a great investment and also we're planting loads of trees, for example, or hey, this is a great investment and also it's like environmentally friendly. How great is that? It's all very anecdotal, but I realized that you could bring a kind of sustainability dimension to any investment that we were making. And I also realized that during the pandemic, that was the final kind of straw that broke the camel's back on a lot of the historical theory about investment. None of the models that I'd learned about at school or in my professional qualifications or at work had taught me or kind of prepared me for the extent of the market drop in 2020. And that caused me to read this book, The End of Theory by Richard Buxton, and he talks about a kind of systems model for financial systems, and that is a much more convincing model, I think, of the markets, and explains in far greater detail, and it explains far more convincingly those sorts of market crashes can happen. And also I think, and if you use a systems-based model of finance and investment, it becomes even clearer how imperative sustainability is, because you realize how interconnected everything is and how people use heuristics and people have behavioral biases when they're making investment decisions. So I think that just added fuel to the fire for my sustainability drive. So through point number 6, I had adapted the rules that governed my field to incorporate new sustainability information. So now it was just about waiting for the point that led to the kind of big bang moment. And for me, that was when I explained a lot of my thoughts and my theory to my boss at the time. And because it was in the language of investment and finance and risk and return, he got it. And he then said to me, how do I build a well below 2 degrees portfolio? And I was a bit stumped initially by that question and went away. And I think I was washing up. It's just how your subconscious mind just kind of brings these ideas to you. And I was washing up and the idea just came to me about having a emissions reduction target for a portfolio. And the idea was that you couldn't build a well below 2 degrees portfolio instantly. I mean, we're not a current well below 2 degrees world currently now. We're on track for like 2.7, I think. But the idea is that we could get there over time and you could manage the pathway down and it would be volatile and you could go long and short climate risk, for example, depending on market pricing, and you could adjust your target over time as it looked to see where we might end up. And yeah, I wrote that email to him and it just kind of exploded from there. And before I knew it, everyone was talking about climate change at work and everyone was talking about the emissions of the portfolio and all the other climate metrics that have been developed. So yeah, I'm now currently working through that and working on the execution stage. So one of the other mistakes I made was that I thought you just had to come up with the idea and you'd get all the credit, but actually it's about execution, and that's what I'm in at the moment. All about execution, getting it done, actually creating it. That was the hard bit. Coming up with the idea is the easy bit, but yeah, it was amazing to kind of bring that to the business and the industry. I think obviously it wasn't just me. I looked back through the CFA ESG notes afterwards thinking like, where did that come from? And yeah, there were emissions reduction benchmark examples in the CFA ESG, so it's not a unique idea I came up with at all, and people were already talking about it in the industry and there were loads of products already out there. But for me it felt like just a complete game changer and changed the whole area, and it felt incredible. I felt so good after doing that. It's the best I've ever felt, better than any kind of pay rise or bonus I've ever had. And yeah, it's still working out. How many years later? 3 years later, I'm still going for it. And yeah, I'm in the middle of it, because when you have something that's yours and you believe in and you're emotionally tied to it, you'll probably pursue it a lot longer than anyone else would. And it's not about the money, it's about seeing your idea through to the end and also not wanting to give up because it's important for the world. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that video. They were my 7 steps to creating an impact and becoming a game changer in your industry, told through my story with a bunch of book recommendations as well. So I hope you enjoyed that video, and don't forget to check out this one here if you want to hear more from me. Thanks.